Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Aleph Ches.
Right. Aleph Ches. Okay. Until, no, I'm sorry. Aleph Ches was Zion.
Ches.
Yes, I'm sorry. I want to look at the bottom.
There is no Zion. Oh, right. Sorry. There is. Yes, there is.
Until when are they considered saplings? The Eliezer ben Azariah says until they become permitted. Rabbi Yeshua says until they are 7 years old. Rabbi Kiva says as long as they are called thus. If a tree was cut down and produced fresh roots, if one handbreadth was less or less, it is accounted as a sapling. If more than a handbreadth, it is accounted a tree. So says Reb Shimon. Until when may a white field be plowed in the 6th year? Until the moisture has dried up, as long as people plow to plant cucumbers or gourds. Reb Shimon says you must put the law for each man into his own hand.
No.
Rather,
You had you. This is what you've done. You put the law of each person into his own hands, which we don't want. We want it to be consistent.
Reb Shimon says you put the law for each man into his own hand, rather in a white field until Pesach, and in an orchard until Shavuos. One may manure and hoe cucumber and gourd fields until Rosh Hashanah. Likewise, irrigated fields one may cut off flaws, strip off leaves, cover up with earth, or fumigate until Rosh Hashanah. Reb Shimon says one may even remove a leaf from a grape cluster in the 7th year. Okay.
Okay, Mishnah Gimel, Misaklin at Rosh Hashanah. This is to remove the stones from a field.
Right.
So that's permitted until Rosh Hashanah.
There you are.
There I am. Sorry, I didn't realize my video was off. So removing the stones is permitted in any kind of field, all the way until Rosh Hashanah. Makarsamin, Mizardin, Mafaslin at Rosh Hashanah. So the other actions here that are listed are also permitted until Rosh Hashanah, which is basically a combination of cutting off the dry twigs, pruning, and Mafaslin is removing removing the waste from the tree. How's that different from the previous ones? It's cutting down the branches in order to thicken the tree. These are things that somebody who knows horticulture will be able to distinguish between. But to me, these look like very similar actions. Anyway, they're all equally permitted until Rosh Hashanah.
I've heard that from gardeners that the tree is really like together a lot. If you start pruning it down a little bit, then it'll grow. It'll grow better. It'll grow
Yeah.
better.
If you prune a tree, it does grow better. And this is also particularly with roses. They use a lot of resources on once the bud is once the flower has fallen, it creates that pod with all the seeds. So if you deadhead them, then they grow better. And also if you prune them, it comes back with a stronger growth. Anyway. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Kezeru Dao Kapisula Shel Chamishis Kach Shel Shishis. So this was an amazing thing to me, which Rabbi Yeshua is saying. He says just like in the 5th year, you can continue and do work do work for that year into the 6th year for pruning and all these actions that we just mentioned in the previous sentence. And you can go from the 5th year into the 6th year. Similarly, from the 6th year into the 7th year, you're even allowed to carry on doing these actions towards in the beginning of the 7th year, which is incredible. According to that says that you're actually allowed to prune. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you'd be allowed to prune the trees in the beginning of the Shemitah year. Okay, we'll say that the halach is not like it, but it's quite a remarkable opinion considering what the way we're normally accustomed to thinking about pruning trees in the Shemitah. And there's also a chumrah to that that on trees where you would normally finish your pruning work before Rosh Hashanah, then you also have to finish pruning before Rosh Hashanah of the 6th year. So there is a tzad chumrah to that as well. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Zman She'ani Rashai Bavodas Ha'ilan Rashai Ani B'Fisulo. He says only up until the time that you're allowed to plow around the tree. Which is until basically Shavuos. that's your time that you're allowed to prune it and no further. So anyway, the halacha follows the Tanna Kama over here that the pruning work is allowed until Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Mishna Daled Mizamin Isanatios. So when you have saplings, if something happened to it and it lost some of its bark or it got exposed somewhere, you spread a pitch or something on the wood in order to protect it. And you can bind them together. So if they split, you can tie them together so they can grow together again, so the pieces can grow together. But kotmin osan, kotmin is you can cut off the ends of the branches, or others explain that this is putting sand on the roots in order to cover them in order that they should grow better. Okay, but osin lahin batim, and you can build you can build a shelter for them in order to protect them from heat or from cold, or from strong rains or winds. Umashkin osan ad Rosh Hashanah, and you can irrigate them all the way until Rosh Hashanah. So that's irrigating them is whether on the top of the tree or on the bottom, the top in order to moisten the leaves, the bottom in order to irrigate it. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok omer af mashkehu esanof b'Shviis. Even during the Shemitah year, you're allowed to sprinkle the top of the tree, just to but you're not allowed to water the base of the tree.
Okay. The Rambam has a different answer on this.
Yeah.
It says that according to another interpretation, the branches are gathered. I'm sorry, that's the wrong thing. Wrong thing was it. The Rambam means oiling ill-smelling saplings in order to ward off insects. He says, well, the part that smears on the,
Right. Okay.
Because the insects get in there and that's it.
Okay. Okay. Next Mishnah, Mishnah Hey. Sachin es a pagim umenakvin osam ad Rosh Hashanah. You're allowed to anoint the figs with oil. So this we learned was a trick that they had with figs that weren't ripening well, or you wanted to give them steroids to ripen a little faster. The idea was that you would, if you smeared them with oil, and even better, if you puncture them so that the oil can seep inside, then the oil heats up and makes it or it does something. It does something to the fruit that makes it ripen better. Okay. So what the Mishnah tells us is that you're allowed to smear oil on the figs and even puncture them up until Rosh Hashanah. Okay, Page Erev Sheviis, however, the ones that are still the late developing figs are from the 6th year that are going to be ripe in the 7th year. Shenichnesu l'Shvius, and now you're already in the Shemitah year. So even though the fruit themselves, remember tree fruit is judged according to the year in which the blossom thickened into that's called chanata. So even though you're only going to pick it in the Shemitah year, so like your lemons, right? Your lemon tree right now, I assume, is in blossom.
Yes, a lot of lemons.
Right, those blossoms are going to form fruits soon, but you're only going to enjoy those fruits in like December this coming year, which will be Shemitah. But that fruit is not Shemitah fruit; it's 6th year fruit. Okay, and vice versa. The fruit that forms during Shemitah, but you only pick it in the 1st year, in the 8th year, is that's Shemitah fruit, and it's hefker. Right. So even following the Shemitah year, that fruit remains hefker, and people can come and take it.
I have a pile of fruit on there now.
Yeah.
So many lemons that we have nothing to do with them. We have any,
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, Ken Yerbo. Make a lot of lemonade.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Anyways, so the same thing goes for these. Now we're talking about the figs that are in this position. So they formed an Erev Sheviis, so they're not Shemitah fruit, but now you're into the Shemitah year. Are you allowed to anoint them? Okay, and the same question goes for Shemitah figs that Sheyatzu Lemotzei Sheviis, and now they're into the 8th year. Lo sachin v'lo menakvin. There, you're not allowed to pull this trick on them. Why? Because for the ones that are going into the Shemitah year, it looks like you're busy doing things to Shemitah fruit. So there, it doesn't look good. And in the other case, you're not allowed to do this to Shemitah fruit because it's got kedusha Sheviis, and it's hefker, and you're not supposed to be doing anything with that fruit anyway. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, makom shenagu lasuch einan sachin mipnei shehi avoda. Makom shenagu shelo lasuch sachin. He says it all depends on what the local custom is. He says if people generally do this trick of smearing the figs with oil, then you can't do this during Shemitah because then it looks like doing avoda sadeh. But if nobody's ever heard of this trick in the place where you are, and you know it, then you're allowed to do it on the 6th year figs because the whole point was Maris Ayin, and people are looking at you and thinking, oh wow, you're doing avoda. But if they don't even realize that this is an avoda, then says Rabbi Yehuda, this is fine. Okay. Rabbi Shimon matir be'ilan mipnei shehu rashai be'avodas ha'ilan. So in other words, he's matir to do malacha on the tree on Motzei Sheviis, even though it's full of Sheviis fruit. Okay, because he's allowed to tend to the tree itself, even if the fruit is hefker. Remember, the fruit. We've seen this before that there are two different dinim on the fruit tree. There's the tree itself, and there's the fruit that's on it, and those two things have two different dinim. We had that also in Kilayim, where somebody planted Kilayim in his kerem during the Shemitah year, and we said that the halach is that the grapes he has no right to aser because they're not his, they're hefker. But the vines after the Shemitah year he's going to have to destroy.
I would think by puncturing a hole in the fruit, you would be worried maybe about bugs getting in or worms or something like that.
Yeah, that's look. I mean, you're talking about putting a pinhole, I think.
Right.
But even so, the fig has got if the bugs that want to get in have got a big hole at the bottom of the fig.
Right.
That's where the fig wasp goes in. That's how the thing actually gets pollinated. Is with the fig wasp. It crawls in through the base, lays its eggs, and crawls out, losing several body parts in the interim.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know.
And it actually gets sort of disintegrated inside the fig.
I love figs. Don't tell me this. I did.
But it's mutar. That's the actual joy of it. Is that the fig is nonetheless permitted, even though it's got the bugs in them.
I know, but just the thought is enough to. Doesn't sit well with me. I don't know.
Oh, you don't like eating bugs? Okay, fine.
Okay, Kalayim.
Yeah.
He who drives receives 40, and he who sits in the wagon receives 40. The mayor exempts, and the third, which is tied to the straps, is forbidden. A horse may not be tied to the sides of a wagon or to the back of a wagon, nor may Libyan donkeys be tied to camels. Rabbi Yehuda says all offspring of a horse, though sired through a donkey, are allowed with one another. All offspring of a donkey, though sired by a horse, are likewise allowed with one another. However, the offspring of a horse are forbidden with the offspring of a donkey. And brutiot are forbidden, but the ramak is permitted. Wild men, like creatures, are wild animals. Rabbi Yossi says they can veil intent uncleanliness as does a human being. The hedgehog and the weasel of the bushes are wild animals, and the weasel of the bushes. The Rabbi Yossi says that Reb Shammai say an olive's bulk conveys uncleanliness by carrying, and a lentil's bulk by contact. Okay. I don't think I've ever seen a weasel. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, hearing you.
Okay. Hey. If one buys from the poor, so too if a poor man is given pieces of bread or fragments of fig cake, he must tithe each one. But in the case of dates and dried figs, he may mix them together and take. Rabbi Yehuda said when the gift is large, and when the gift is small, he separates the tithe from each one.
And so when it's a large thing, then you can treat it as if it's almost as if it's a liquid, that whatever you take out will be in proportion. But when you've got a small gift, then you can't be sure that each one individually could already have been maaser. So if you try and take maaser from it, then it's not going to work. But when it's a large number of things, then you can assume that the proportions are kept even.
If one buys from a wholesaler and then buys again, He should not separate tithes from one for the other, not even from the same container, and not even from the same kind. The wholesaler may be believed when he says they are from one. If one buys from a field owner and brought from him again, he may tithe from him one for the other, even from two baskets, even from two towns. If a field owner was selling vegetables in the market, if they bring him from his garden, he may tithe from one for all, and if from another garden, he must tithe from each one. When they say bought from him again, they mean he went back 2 days later, or the same day he went back, or you know.
Sorry, let me just see this. בעל הבית שהיה מוכר וירק בשוק בזמן שמבין לו מגין נוסף. מעשר מאחד על הכל. So he can, right, if you're buying from one particular farmer,
Right.
right, then either he is Maser or he takes Maser or he doesn't. As long as it's all consistent, that's fine because if he's taken Maser, then you did nothing and you
Right.
didn't need to do anything. And if you didn't take Maser, then the Maser is good for all of it. But if you're taking from multiple gardeners, you may have some who are a little more scrupulous about Maser than not. And you can't take from Maser stuff from the Chayiv and the Pater, and you can't take from the Pater and the Chayiv. You've got to make sure it's all consistent.
Okay. If one buys from a field owner and brought from him again, he may tithe from one for the other, even from two baskets, even from two towns. If a field owner was selling vegetables in the market, if they bring him from his garden, he may tithe for one for all, and from other gardens he must tithe for each one. We did
Right,
this.
because when it comes from other people, then we introduce inconsistency to the mix because you have different people involved. That's our general rule with the demai. As long as you know that it's coming from one person, then you can assume that he is consistent about his master habits. But as soon as you introduce the possibility that there's more than one person, then people are different, and you have to try and you have to separately take deal with the demai of each one.
Okay, hey Yud. If one pours from a hot vessel into a hot vessel, or from a cold vessel into a cold vessel, or from a hot vessel into a cold, he is tahor. From a cold vessel into a hot vessel, he is tameh. Reb Shimon says, if one pours from a hot vessel into a hot vessel, and the strength of the lower one is greater than that of the upper one, it is tameh. If a woman whose hands were tahor was stirring a tameh pot, if her hands perspired, they are tameh. If her hands were tameh and she was stirring a tahor pot, if her hands perspired, the pot is tameh. Rabbi Yossi says if they dripped, if someone weighed grapes in the pan of a scale, the wine in the pail is tahor until he pours it into a container. This is similar to baskets of olives and grapes when they are dripping.
So up until the point where he actually considers it chashuv, the liquid that drips out of the grapes is a kilo. It's not there.
If someone took his produce up to the roof on account of insects and dew descends on it, it is not included in the law. If he intended for this, it is included in the law. If a deaf, mute, deranged person or minor took up produce, even if he intended for the dew to fall upon the produce, it is not included in the law, for they have an act, but not intent.
Right, we've seen that plenty of times with the Cheresh of the Katan, that they can do actions, and if they do an action, then that has halachic ramifications. But anything that requires kavana, we say they don't have das, and therefore their kavana is meaningless.
That's it, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Kalim. Chaf Beis Hay.
A chair whose slats did not protrude and they were removed is tameh, because it is usual to turn it on its side and sit on it. A chair whose center slat was removed and the outer ones remain, it is tameh. If the outer slats were removed and the center slat remains, it's tameh.
Right, you can still sit on it.
If it was one handbreadth wide.
Only if it is one handbreadth wide, otherwise it's not comfortable to sit on.
If one, no. Regarding a chair whose two adjacent slats were removed, Rebbe Kiva rules it is tameh, but the Kakamed rule it tahor. Rabbi Yehuda said even a bridal chair whose panels were removed and a receptacle remained in it is tahor, since the primary function is disabled and the secondary function is also disabled. Okay.
Marcos. Beis.
Similarly, a murderer who went into exile in his city of refuge and the people of the city wished to honor him, he should say to them, I am a murderer. And if they said to him, even so, he may accept the honor from them, as it is said, and this is the matter of the murderer. They would pay rent to the Levium. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, and Reb Meir says they would not pay them rent. He returns to the office he had previously occupied. These are the words of Reb Meir. And Reb Yehuda says he would not return to the office he previously occupied. These are the ones who incur the
Just by the
penalty.
way, I want you to just bookmark this Mishnah in your mind, because the same Mishnah appears in Sheviis when we talk about the Shemitah, when he says Shometani. He says, I lent you money, Shemitah's passed over it, so I don't want the money back. And if the debtor comes and says, listen, even though the Shemitah's gone, I still want to pay you back. And he says, okay, that's fine. So that's so, and it's a similar drasha with the Rotzeach, who says he's in the Imriklat and they want to give him shlishi, and he says, listen, I'm a Rotzeach. And say, okay, you're a Rotzeach, we still want to be machaved you, and then he's allowed to accept. So it's a similar thing. That's why we've got the Kiyotze Bo, because this Mishnah was borrowed from Sheviis in that respect. Okay.
These are the ones who incur the penalty of lashes. One who cohabitates with his sister, his father's sister, his mother's sisters, his wife's sister, his brother's father, his brother's wife, his father's brother's wife, or I was mentioned, a widow to a Kohen Gadol, a divorcee or a Kaluta to an ordinary Kohen. A Mamzeris or a Nisonite to a Yisrael, and a Yisraelis to a Nisonite or to a Mamzer. For a widow and a divorcee, he is liable for 2 negative commandments. For a divorcee and a Kaluta, he is liable for but 1 negative commandment. One who slaughters a sacrificial animal or offers it up outside the temple. One who eats chametz on Pesach. One who eats or performs work on Yom Kippur. One who compounds anointing oil, compounds incense, or anoints with the anointing oil. One who eats nevelos, trephis, abominable creatures, and crawling things. One who eats tevel or ma'aser rishon from which truma was not separated, or ma'aser sheni, or consecrated objects which were not redeemed. How much must he eat of tevel to be liable? Reb Shimon says any amount. The Chachamim, however, say the bulk of the olive. Reb Shimon says to them, said Reb Shimon, do not incur with me in concerning one who eats an ant of any size that is liable. They replied, eat it because it is as if it was created. He replied, one wheat kernel too, as if it was created.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why we're so makpid on insects, is because it's a bria. It's exactly so that chashivos, even though it's less than a kazayas, you can be liable for eating an ant. Okay. Now Rabbi Shimon wanted to take this even further and say, well, if you eat a whole wheat kernel, that's also kabriyasa, a wheat kernel of isser.
Right.
And the Chacham said, no, that's not how it goes. It's only the animal, the living creatures that's applied to. Okay. Next.
One who eats bikor.
Beitza.
Are we finished?
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
Did. Okay. That's the way.
Yeah, right.
That's the way you're gonna be. Okay. All right. Let me see where I left off here. We left off on olive. Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
One who carries pitchers of wine from place to place may not carry them in a basket or in a hamper, but he may carry them upon his shoulder or in front of himself. Similarly, one who transports straw may not lower the hamper upon his back, but he may carry it in his hand. So they're saying over here you can't put things behind you.
This is on Yom Tov we're talking about.
Right.
Because we don't want it to look like he's doing manual labor on the Yom Tov. It must be carried in a way that it's not doesn't look like he's doing as work as his panas or something.
We may begin using a stack of straw, but not wood, which is in the backyard. Just as a commentary, I'll wait till you finish the recording after that. We may not detach wood from a hut except for which adjoins it. We may carry in wood from a field, from that which had been gathered from which an enclosure, and even what is scattered. What is considered an enclosure? Whichever is near to the town. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, whichever they must enter with a key, even when it is just within the Sabbath boundary.
Okay, so the idea is here that we don't want somebody to go out into the field and go picking up random pieces of wood from all around, because that's you're allowed to light a fire on Yom Tov, but we don't want people going and gathering wood all over the place. We want just if whatever was ready and within easy reach, he's allowed to pick up for Yom Tov.
You say you're allowed to light a fire on Yom Tov. It has to be from an existing fire.
Sure.
No, I know that, but I'm saying if you just said that's not to someone who didn't know, they would say, "Oh, I can light a fire."
Oh, okay. Yes. Fair enough.
We may not split wood neither from beams nor from a beam which was broken on Yom Tov, nor may we split with an axe, a saw, or a sickle, or a kopitz. If a room that is full of produce was sealed but is broken into, one may take from the place where the room is broken into. Reb Meir says one may even break in initially and take. Okay,
Okay, example.
that's it. Okay, I was going to tell you.